So I'd like to begin with a question. By a show of hands, who here loves food? Oh yes, most people. Okay, so what do you love about food? By a show of hands. In the front, I'm going to pick on you. Yes.
It keeps alive.
Okay, it keeps us alive. Anything else that we love about food?
All the different flavors.
Amazing, all the different flavors. And I saw another hand. We can have great conversations about food and around food, exactly. And all of these things are terrific reasons to love food. And I think one of the reasons why I love food is because I love science. And when I first learned about photosynthesis, and I learned that plants take carbon dioxide and water, and with the nutrients in our soil, they grow all of the vegetables, the fruits, the nuts, the seeds, and the grains that we eat and give us energy. I thought this was incredible. This was amazing at a molecular level. And then when I take a step back and think about what food does to our society and how it tastes so good and how it brings families together in the evening to talk about their day and how it's the central point of celebrations and festivals and how it gives people an outlet of being creative and its flavor and its color and its culture, food simply astounds me. And so, wanting to share this passion for food, as we've heard, I co-founded an organization, Seed by Seed, with my partner, Misha. And we wanted to try and reconnect communities to their food. And our first main project was cycling across Canada in the summer of 2014, delivering interactive workshops and presentations about the power of food. We cycled from Victoria, BC to St. John's, Newfoundland, and although I'm still kind of debriefing and interpreting all of the things that I saw over 3 months, I'm really excited to be here today to share with you about what cycling across Canada taught me about food. And the main message that I really want to drive home is how food makes us powerful. So to begin, oh, this is a photo at mile 0. Woo! So to begin, the first thing that I really learned was that food fuels us. Now, this photo was taken, I think, after a bit too big of a lunch that I had, not feeling maybe as energized as I anticipated. But the idea that food fuels us was at the forefront of 3 months of being on the road because my body was now the machine that was powering me across Canada. And never before had I thought so much about what these molecules that I was eating were doing to my body, and I had to eat 3 big, full meals and some a day to replenish the 6,000, 7,000 calories that we were burning as we were cycling across the country. Never before had I thought so much about food. It occupied so much space and so much time in my head, and this was exciting. And never before had I had such an intimate relationship with food myself. We would wake up in the morning, and the first thing we would do was light our stove, and we'd cook oatmeal. We'd shove in spoonfuls of peanut butter, chop up an apple if we were lucky, and oddly enough, it wasn't until Saskatchewan that we bought cinnamon, but that really added to our breakfast when we did. But we'd eat this oatmeal, we'd make coffee, we'd boil water and use a makeshift strainer that we made out of a J-cloth and an elastic band. We'd eat our breakfast, disassemble our tents, jump on our bikes, and with a few first pedals, I knew that I was fueled and I was ready to tackle the day. And after about 8-9 hours of being on the road, we'd come into our final destination, and we could see the signs on the side of the highway with, your next destination, 10 kilometers, 5 kilometers, until you see the big welcome sign. And it was so exciting because that meant that we were about to eat dinner soon. And the first thing that we would do when we would get to a new town or a new city is we'd ask the locals, where is the nearest grocery store? And we'd lock up our bikes, we'd jump in to the grocery store, helmet still on probably, all in our sweaty gear, and we'd just be amazed by all of the food that we were going to be able to eat as we would prepare dinner. And often we'd grab a couple slices of bread or a bun or a donut or something to keep us satisfied and to tie over what we called hanger, the mix of hunger and anger when you're just so hungry, as we'd walk up and down the aisle and we'd get to decide what we were going to make for dinner. And we'd buy our groceries and we'd often set up shop in the parking lot, sprawl out our knives and our bowls, our makeshift, little kitchen that we were carrying with us, and we'd prepare our meal, wraps, sandwiches, what we like to call one-pot wonders, which was basically everything we could find shoved in a bowl mixed with salad dressing, and we would sit there in sheer bliss eating our food. And it was extremely empowering as a young woman being able to think that I am eating this food that is nourishing my body and it's enabling me to do something that I never thought I would be able to do before. And so just as this food has fueled me and fuels us on our day-to-day basis, food also fuels some pretty messed up systems here in Canada. And this leads me to the second main thing that I learned throughout the bike trip, is that despite living in a country so vast and so developed, food insecurity still exists in Canada. Through biking, I learned that people, especially in cities, are disconnected from food. People don't know how it is grown, how it gets to us, and we often no longer even prepare our own meals. We are giving this power to corporations, and we have really devalued our food. I could eat the exact same sub in every small town across an entire continent. The same exact toppings, the same shredded iceberg lettuce and pale tomatoes that you get at Subway were unanimous across the country. How can this be? And we don't even question this. We demand that same food all the time. We don't question that in grocery stores in the harsh winters of February in Ottawa, we can eat raspberries. We don't question that in the prairies, when we're surrounded by grasses and fields, we can eat tropical fruit. And did you know that in North America, the average food item has traveled just under 2,500 kilometers to get from the farm where it was grown to our plates? And that sometimes the things that do grow around us are not even what we are eating. I was astounded that in the Okanagan Valley, the fruit capital of BC, where we spent days cycling through fruit orchards, that I could walk into Walmart and see that they were only selling cherries that were a product of the USA, despite it being BC cherry season, one of the most celebrated and exciting seasons there are. This doesn't make sense. This summer, we cycled through First Nations communities, and I didn't understand how people could survive in these areas because the closest grocery store was hundreds of kilometers away and only accessible by cars. People now live in what's termed as food deserts, vast, giant spans where people don't have access to fresh produce. Often in these areas, there were only a few convenience stores or gas stations selling only packaged, processed food items. And we wonder why obesity rates are amongst the highest in our Aboriginal communities. From living in a city myself, I also know that food access in urban cities is unequal, and that food literacy is low. There is major hunger facing thousands of people in our cities that have to decide between spending money on nutritious food or other basic necessities of life. We cycled through the prairies, and I was astounded by the fields that seemed to go on forever, as far as the eye could see. Now, we spent many hours in the prairies cycling through the monotonous scenes, but they were all corn, soy, and wheat. Huge monocrops that are taking over our food system. And it seems strange to me that I can walk down the cereal aisle of our grocery store and think I have hundreds of options at my disposal, but they came from the same three crops. Along our journey, Misha and I met farmers who talked about the politics of farming and how when they first got involved in the industry as young farmers in their 20s, and now, 40 years later, how much their job has changed was astounding. A lot of farmers now are feeling pressured to buy seeds from large companies like Cargill and Monsanto just in order to compete with yield so that they can still sell their produce. Often farmers now consider themselves food insecure because they don't have the money to afford proper and nutritious food for their own families, and they don't have the land to be growing a diverse number of crops to feed themselves. It also really struck me that the first thing you would see when cycling into a city were fast food restaurants. You could see their signage pasted along the sides of the highways. McDonald's, 25 kilometers, 10 minutes, exit 12. And then you could see the giant billboards, and you'd see almost them competing for your attention, competing against one another. And you'd see their tall, tall signs, and you know you were getting close to civilization. We have seemed to have given the job of feeding ourselves to these large companies, and now 10 mega corporations have monopolized our food system in North America and control so much of what we eat. This summer, I realized that food insecurity exists in Canada, and that there is a lot that we don't know about the impacts our food choices have in shaping our world. But amongst all of these complexities that I witnessed in biking across Canada, one of my biggest understandings was that people want to help. People care, and they have an innate sense and desire to be connected to something greater than themselves. And in no case was this exemplified more than when I met Ian. Now, Ian is a passionate man that lives in Huzzar, Alberta. And Misha and I had just come out of Calgary, and we were posted up for lunch at a restaurant on the side of the highway where we met Ian. And he was from Scotland, and he had moved to this tiny town of 400 in Huzzar, Alberta. And his life's passion was to discover what he called hidden gems. And it was his mission to share these hidden gems with the world. And so he told us about Drumheller, which he thought was a hidden gem of Canada. And neither Misha or I had heard about Drumheller, but it has a giant canyon right in the middle of the prairies, and there is, it was a past dinosaur haven, I guess, because they have all of these fossilized records, and it's right in the middle of all of these fields. So he recommended that we checked out Drumheller. Now, it was a couple hundred kilometers north of Highway 1, which meant it was going to be a couple of extra days of cycling, but hear Ian talk so passionately about Drumheller, we decided to check it out. And so we cycled for an extra few days, got to check out the Dino Museum. We're quite amazed by what we saw. And as we were cycling out on day 3 from this little detour, we were struck in one of the worst windstorms that we faced in 3 months. Now, often people ask, when we are saying that we've been biking for this long, they ask, how did you make it through the Rockies? That must have been so tough. And well, yes, cycling through the mountains had its challenges. What was the most mentally strenuous and physically demanding task was cycling in headwinds. Because you couldn't see them, you were going on this flat land, yet you'd feel this brick wall at your face. And that is what we were feeling on this day, passing out of Drumheller. And not only were we facing headwinds, but we were facing crosswinds. And so imagine us. We're on our bicycles, and you have to lean into the wind just so you don't blow over. And so there we are, trying to stay strong on our bicycles, and I lost concentration and I lost my strength just for a second. And just in that midst, I got blown across to the other side of the highway and ended up in a ditch on the other side of the street. And I was petrified. And when you don't have confidence, you don't want to be on your bike. I just wanted to curl up in a ball. And so we kind of did what we usually do when we needed a break. We sat down, opened up our jar of peanut butter, grabbed a couple spoons, and took a break. And so there we were on the side of the highway thinking, what are we going to do? There's no one around us. We're in this storm. We're in the middle of the fields. Everything looks the same. What are we going to do? And lo and behold, we see a pickup truck driving towards us. And it slows down, and it comes to a stop right by our bikes on the side of the road, and out steps Ian. And he had seen what this windstorm was like, and he had been worried and questioning, what if they're still out there? And so he knew the route that we would be taking, and he drove, and he rescued us. He put on our bikes in the back of his pickup truck. He had a makeshift bike stand to make sure that they were upright, and he drove us home to his little tiny town of Hazar, where his wife Doreen had a full meal at the table waiting for us. And we shared the evening with them, exchanging stories, spent the night, slept in a warm, cozy bed. They fed us up with breakfast in the morning, and off we went, ready to go. And through Ian, I was reminded that people want to help. He wanted nothing in exchange for his hospitality and his kindness. He just wanted to be connected to the story that we were sharing and what we were doing as we biked. And this was enough for him. And so I've realized that people do want to feel connected to a movement. People want to have a positive impact. And as I saw, food has a tremendous impact on our world. So why not let food be the outlet for people to be positive agents of change in our world? Which leads to this last point, that food makes us powerful. And I want to demonstrate this power that we have through a demonstration. In my hands, I have 2 apples. I have a green one, and I have a red one. And I would like you to make a choice. If you were to eat one of these 2 apples, which would you choose? So by a show of hands, who here would eat this green one? Okay, amazing. Now, who here would eat this red one? Okay. So this green apple I have here was grown on a farm in China, over 6,000 kilometers away. China actually grows half of our world's consumed apples. And this apple was grown on a conventional farm that uses chemical pesticides and fertilizers. It was harvested and transported here by ship and by truck, all consuming fossil fuels along the way. Often workers on these large farms are not earning minimum wage, and they're exposed to the harsh chemical pesticides and fertilizers, causing adverse health effects. And it's been shown that on the average apple grown on a conventional farm, there is the residue from over 42 pesticides. Now with this red apple, it was grown on a local farm just outside of Ottawa. It was grown organically, meaning that it doesn't have any chemical inputs onto the farm. I met the gentleman who picked this apple this morning at the Ottawa Farmers Market. There was no plastic involved in the packaging or getting this apple from his farm to my hands, and there were no middlemen involved, meaning that all of the profits from this produce was supporting Rob and our local economy. So as you can see, these 2 apples have incredibly different backstories and how they were brought to us. And just like all of our food choices, they have a tremendous impact on the world. And it's important that we get to be curious about these backstories behind our food, how it was grown, where it came from, how it was prepared, and how it got to us, so that we can start to address some of the pressing social and environmental issues of our time. And what I find exciting about this notion is that we eat multiple times a day, meaning that we can be connected to this movement every single time we eat. I think it is crucial that we are educated and we begin to prioritize food in our lives again. We need to support systems that are building community, our local economy, improving our health, and reducing our environmental impact. We need to vote with our forks. Now, along our 8,000-kilometer journey, we met countless innovators within the food system. People growing food in urban settings using materials that would have otherwise been thrown away. We met people engaging youth in community garden projects and teaching them about the seed cycle. We met individuals tackling the issues of rural food deserts by connecting food insecure people to a fresh produce supply, and people starting up transportation options for those living in these areas without cars. We met people using backyards in suburbs to grow foods for local restaurants and to be part of community-supported agriculture programs. We visited schools with cafeteria programs that were led by students in the kitchen who were using food grown by students just down the road. We were welcomed into many community dinners, cycled by countless farmers markets, and truly saw a growing food movement in Canada. It was evident that there is hope, and involving everyone in this food movement gives us purpose and enables us to reconnect with food. So I really challenge you now to be curious about where your food comes from, how it was grown, and how it was prepared so that you can vote with your fork to address issues that you care about. And in doing so, I think that you get to reprioritize one of the most fundamental joys in life: food. So thank you for listening. Thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the rest of the presentations.